if you can put your name and organization in the chat. Also, if you can mute your lines, that will help us. If you are able, if you can mute your line, that will mean that we will only be able to listen to the person who's presenting. And before we start, we have a very short poll, a small set of questions that will come up on the screen, and then we'll get into the presentation. Guy Hatton will lead us in the presentation. Vanessa, are you able to launch the poll? Okay, thank you. Okay, I think, Vanessa, this is all we have, right? So I think we can, have you received all the responses? Okay. So maybe before we start, we'll put this up here, and then I will invite Guy Hatton to get ready for the presentation. But Katarina, Guy, do you want to say anything about what you're seeing on the screen, the results, or we should? So what I'm seeing here, we've got almost half of the participants from Mexico, and then it's 50-50 on whether they've already on question 2. Yeah, 50-50.
And we still don't have the colleagues from Haiti and Peru on the
call. That is true.
Okay, but it's great. So there are experiences already with some of these tools for costing SDG 6, and I think it would be good then that participants bring that into the discussion. Over.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Katarina. And so without taking more time, we will go straight to the discussion. Guy Hatton will make a presentation, and then we will have more room for discussion and questions. If you have a question while he's presenting, feel free to put that in the chat.
Great. Well, thank you, Sitali. Thank you to the organizers of this meeting and the Sanitation and Water for All Secretariat. And thank you to all those who've come to this webinar to understand a bit more about the costing tool that we'll present today. I am working currently with UNICEF in New York as senior advisor. I'm an economist by training and have been working also on financing issues in the last few years. So could we go to the next slide, please? So this tool that I will present today is based on a study conducted by the World Bank when I was previously with the World Bank, where we estimated the costs of meeting the SDG WASH targets by 2030. The study was conducted across 140 countries. It's only written 40 here, but it's 140 countries. So it's very likely that your country was included in that. We drew on data that it was available from secondary sources, so international databases and some costing assumptions we used. And so this study was published 5 years ago now, and it showed that we need 114 billion US dollars per year globally in these 140 countries to meet the capital expenditures for WASH. Obviously, that is a very considerable number. and it's a global number, and so we need to understand better what is happening, what the countries need. Could you click one more time, please? So the essential features of the tool, or variables that can be changed, is the number of people who are without a service, either a basic service, which is very similar to the previous improved water and sanitation in the MDG period. And also we looked at safely managed service level, which is a new service level for the SDGs. We also looked at open defecation for those countries that still have that issue, and reducing open defecation to 0. In order to reach the target by 2030, we looked at what total population needs to receive the service, including population growth over 15 years, and we allocated 15 tranches, 15 sort of parts of that population across the 15 years. We included capital costs, software, operations and maintenance costs, and we extracted the prices of services, or the unit costs, from a range of databases and studies. And we had to use some cross-country extrapolation because we didn't have those data for all the countries. And so there is some uncertainty associated with these global numbers. Next slide, please. So when this study was released, we also released a database which showed all the numbers. But then it was realized in order for people to use this this Excel file, we had to turn it into a user-friendly format. And so in preparation for the high-level meetings of SWA in 2017, we converted the Excel file into a more user-friendly tool. And the Excel file contains 3 main sheets. One is a user guide. One is a dashboard which allows you to identify and put in different data than the data in the sheet. And then there's a sheet showing a summary of the costs, and you can represent costs either in US dollars or in your local currency. So a number of sheets are hidden because there's a lot of databases underlying this, and there's no need for most users to look at the underlying sheets. And there is a global service desk. So UNICEF and SWA Secretariat are sort of supporting countries to implement the tool. And other agencies are also supporting. So possibly you have development partners in your country who are ready to step up and support the use of the tool. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just show you very quickly some aspects of the tool. Could you click 3 more times, please? So when you first come into the data verification sheet, you have to choose your country, because underlying the sheets are the data that we used for your country. So you can populate your the values using the numbers we used for your country. We can also change the baseline year. So originally the tool had a baseline year of 2016, but we adjusted the tool last year so that you can change your baseline year. So as you get closer to the target year of 2030, you can continue updating your numbers and thereby changing the baseline year. there are a number of other things you can change in the tool, which I'm going to talk through in the coming sheets. So there's a long list of the variables that can be changed that are listed here. So next slide, please. So can we click one time? So first we have to choose, the tool essentially distinguishes between urban settings and rural settings. So in each of these settings, you can choose a technology. The default technology here is a tube well and a dug well for water, for basic water. You can change the technology by writing a different technology in there, and click again, please. So then you have to show, for some categories, there's only one choice. So for safely managed water, we only have one type of technology. Click again. And then you have to write in the next column, this one, the proportion of population who are unserved now that are going to receive that technology. Click again, please. Now the orange column shows the coverage level in the baseline year. So if it's 2017 or 2018, 2019, you've got to write the baseline year and the coverage level according to your best national statistics you have available. And then the final column is the target for the year 2020. So if you write 100%, it's assuming universal coverage. In your own national targets may be below 100%, in which case you would write a different number. Next slide, please. So further along in the same sheet, you have some more columns, and these are the costs, the unit costs. So the first of these is the capital expenditure, CapEx, and you have to write the cost per capita of delivering an infrastructure to the population. And then the next column is the software cost for behavior change and program management. The next column shows the average duration of this equipment or technology or infrastructure. So for example, for a tube well, it may have a longer life than a dug well. But many of the bigger infrastructures will have a useful life of at least 20 years. And because the tool only models for 10 or 15 years, it doesn't make a big difference even if the duration is 30 or 40 years. It wouldn't change the results significantly. And then the brown columns shows the cost recovery rate. Because this tool helps you determine where you're going to finance these costs from, these columns allow you to choose whether it's going to be financed from the customer, in other words, tariffs, or if it comes from some kind of subsidy, either taxes or transfers from international or local organizations. So, and then the final columns similarly show the operating costs. These are the annual operating costs per capita, and we can also distinguish how these operating costs are financed, either from the customer or from a subsidy. So next slide, please. So then in the next sheet, you can see the tabulation with all the results in various forms. So there are quite a number of graphics, and I'm only going to show a couple of example graphics here. So first, you should choose your preferred currency. So where it says KSH, you can change it to your own national currency, or you can change it to US dollars. And you need to enter, in the previous sheet, you need to enter the exchange rate from dollars to your currency. And then all these graphs are generated automatically. So you can't change them, but you can copy them and include them in reports and other documents. Click again, please. So because of the uncertainty of some of the data you'll be entering in the previous sheet, you might want to experiment with different values so that you can see how sensitive the results are to different input values. As I said, the previous sheet is populated with default numbers for your country from the 2016 study. So they are out of date and will need to be studied and updated by you in order to get realistic, up-to-date estimates. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, it's possible to also do an analysis of where the financing will come from in order to cover the costs of meeting the targets. And there's a table in the data verification sheet which allows you to enter the current spending from different levels and in different areas and subsectors. So you can have a disaggregation by water, sanitation, or non-disaggregated spending if you can't distinguish water and sanitation. You can break it down by urban and rural areas, and then you can break it down by national budgets, subnational budgets, and current overseas development assistance, which can be with loans or with grants. So while there may be other sources, it is important to try to include all the different sector financing from taxes and transfers in this table. And once you include the data, then it allows you to generate a graphic on the right side, which shows the proportion of your cost needs, your investment needs, that are covered by the existing finances, and it shows you the resource gap as well. So this is where the sensitivity analysis might help. If you find there's a very large gap in sector resources, then you can play with the numbers. You can change the technology, you can change the targets for 2030 to reduce the gap, just to see what types of policy change can reduce the gap and make the costs more affordable. Next slide, please. Right, so this is just a final sort of concluding remarks. So I think the first are very obvious, but it's important to say that the analysis is only as strong as the data that you use. If you make an error in estimating, like the wrong decimal point or something, then you'll get a very wrong output. So it's important to make sure that the units are right and that the data is verified. And to note that this is very approximate. So the numbers can change significantly from just changing one or two input numbers, and these numbers themselves are uncertain. So we're talking sort of ballpark numbers, which can sort of help inform the policy debate. And why we released this tool originally was in the hope that countries would pick up the tool and it would stimulate you, incentivize you to think more deeply about what it will cost the country or different parts of the country to meet the WASH targets, and to do more detailed analyses. So there are other tools which allow much more detailed analyses based on different technology choices in order to meet the targets, and that can be down to municipal level or one service provider. up to a national analysis. And the final point, I'm trying to interpret the Spanish, but the final point is that I think one important aspect of this tool, even though the numbers are very approximate, it does allow an important discussion about different categories of WASH investment and operation and maintenance, to spark the debate on how these costs will be financed, from one of the, or two or three of the three T's: the taxes, the transfers, and the tariffs. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, so I'll hand it back to you, Satali, to lead the discussion. Thank you.
Great, great, and thank you so much, Guy. That was very quick and to the point, so we appreciate that. That gives us enough time to have a discussion, to do a Q&A. I was looking in the chat, no tenemos las preguntas. We do not have any questions in the chat, but we would like to open the floor in case you have a question or a point that you would like to get some clarification on. You can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and then share the question that you have. We have really good participation from a number of countries, and we hope to be able to provide any responses to the questions that people have. Do we have anybody with a question?
Hi, Sitali. Alban speaking.
Yes,
how
please.
Are you?
Very well, thank you.
No.
And how are you?
Great, thanks. No, thanks. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it's fine if I speak in English, no, for translation. So maybe not a question, but thanks, Guy, again for the presentation. But maybe out of the 50% of countries who already did some cost estimates for SDG 6, if any one of them already also used and had a trial at the costing tool, and just a quick few minutes experience between how the tool, SWA tool, helped to the discussion that Guy was talking about, you know, to around the budget and financing. So yeah, maybe more than this. If I don't know if someone on the floor has done the experience of using two different tools, the national tool and this SWA tool, that would be great. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alban. So we've got that question which is going to the floor. At the beginning of this meeting, we had a poll and we asked people if you've used any costing exercise for the SDG, and 50% said yes. So Alban would like to hear if some of you have used this tool, what was your experience? So feel free to raise your hand or to pick the floor. We have a question that has come from Eric, and he's asking what baseline data is being used. And please feel free to put the question even in Spanish. We will be able to pick it up. Thank you very much. Guy, do you want to start with the question that we have in the chat, and then we'll see if we have anybody who would like to contribute from their experience?
Certainly, yes. So the answer is that you can use any baseline data that best reflects the situation in your country. At the start of the SDG period, 6 years ago, very few countries were estimating the coverage of safely managed WASH. Very few countries had baseline data for hygiene or hand washing. Over the last years, we've started to build up a global picture of coverage according to the new indicators. But many countries still don't have that. So you might want to turn to what the JMP, the Joint Monitoring Program of UNICEF and WHO, have generated for your country. But obviously, the first place to go is to your national surveys, your administrative data, if it's aggregated to national level. and if you have a different service standard, so if you don't have safely managed exactly, but you've got piped water, then and if it depends, of course, what your national target is and what is the standard in your national target. But if you don't have safely managed data, then you might want to use piped water to household, or whatever standards you use in your country. So I hope that answers the question to Eric Estrada.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you so much for that. I will check. I think we have one more. Okay, so Eric is just giving feedback on that. Do we have anyone here who has used this tool or another tool to do the similar exercise?
So, Sitali, may I jump
Yes,
in?
Alban.
Yeah, just to give a hand to Hedwig regarding like a quick translation. So basically in Haiti, they've got a national WASH program by I mean, yeah, per objective, per results, we can say so. That also reflects the costs, no, that are needed to achieve I mean the 2030 objective, no. And so Hedwig wanted to share with all of you that basically right now they are in the process to make this tool an interactive tool. So I would assume, yeah. So with the actors of the sector, I guess. So yeah, we'll let you know more if Edwige shares more information. But just to let you know, it's in the chat box. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, she shared it with me through the chat box. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alban.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, Madame Petit. Hello? Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Alban. I wanted to say that I don't know if you know the budget program by objective, but for us, it is the tool that we use to evaluate the cost and to evaluate the expenses every year to see if we will reach or no the SDG. I don't know if you know it, but it looks like what Guy is talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So you say that you've used a different approach, but it looks quite similar to get to your costs. Guy, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I don't have much to say, but other than bonjour, Edwige. Very nice that you could join the call. And I'm aware of the tool. And I mean, I just want to say, and as you see from the presentation, it's a very simple tool. It just multiplies a few numbers together, unit costs by population to be served, to estimate a ballpark number. So it's simple on purpose, because I think that getting the key disaggregations is important, and you know, this is the starting point for more in-depth analyses. So yeah, it's if you have your own tool that does that, then there's not much reason to use a different tool. So thank you. And Sitali, if I may, I want to give Katerina a chance to come in, as she works very much closely on these issues. So over to you, Katerina.
Sí, gracias, Guy. En el principio de la reunión, en el poll,
Thanks, Guy. At the beginning of the meeting, in the poll,
mitad de las personas
half of the people
dicho que en sus países han
said
usado
that
herramientas de
in their
cálculos de
countries,
costos.
they've used
Oh, sorry.
costing tools. Sorry.
I need to use the other, I'm in another channel. I'm so sorry, I have to do it in English. So at the start of the call in the poll, half of the countries have said that they used already tools for calculating the costs of SDG 6. So I wonder, we had, if Vanessa, if you could put a link that if you all could just, we would like to understand more the nature of the challenges of using the existing tools, and then maybe have a conversation if this tool is useful for you or if you can use other tools. For instance, I'm aware that Colombia in its Plan Director has used already costing tools. There are estimates in some of the countries on the call. So it would be very useful for the different countries to share what have been the challenges in using some of the costing tools. You can also speak, and we can also put the link where you can type some of your challenges in using other tools.
Thank you. And so, Katerina, we'll get to the Menti, right? Shortly. There's one question from Betania. So if we answer this question, and then I think we can get to the, yes, the Menti. You've put the link in the chat. So the question from Betania is asking whether the tool allows the use of data from different sources of information. And Betania, if you would like to speak, to pick up the floor and speak, that is fine. If you needed, if you wanted to make any clarification on the question.
Perfecto, gracias Italy. ¿Me escuchan bien?
That's brilliant. Thank you, Italy.
Sí.
Can you hear me?
Sí,
Yes.
sí, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Ok, bueno, la pregunta justamente
All right then. The question was precisely about, or it was about the fact that in Paraguay we do have different sources of information, and at some points we could not submit some reports on Latinosan, for instance, because our data was taken from different sizes, so we could not complete the survey with the forms because we didn't have one single database. So my question is whether this tool allows us to use different sources of information. And Katerina already said that it is possible. So I have a second question, if you allow me.
Yes, please.
la otra pregunta
So the other question refers rather to the wording in the tool. For instance, the definition of what's on the column for services, where is it from? Which source is it from? Because maybe we speak about drinking water provision, but we do not say basic water provision. So I want to know exactly which data we need to use to populate the fields correctly. And this is why we need to know very well the wording in this part. Thank you.
Thank you, Betania. Thank you very much. So I'd be happy to quickly try and answer those. On your question of different sources of information, just to reiterate, you look at each variable in the data verification sheet, and you take the best source of information for each variable. So for drinking water in rural area, it might be from one ministry. For drinking water for urban area, it might be from a regulator. So you take the best source of information, the most reliable source, and it doesn't matter if you're putting together data from different sources in the same tool, but I think it'll give you the best results if you use the best available sources of data. And in terms of the type of service, so in the presentation, you will have seen that the service, well, it's called the SDG costing tool. So we use the SDG standards in the target 6.1 and 6.2, which is around safely managed water and safely managed sanitation. And also, because we're moving from MDG definitions and standards to SDG definitions and standards, we've maintained the lower level standard, the basic water, because many countries are still dealing with that issue, and needs to prioritize basic water in order to make sure the funding is sufficient for universal access to basic water and basic sanitation. So, but then you can choose the technology which will achieve that service level in the column that is titled technology. You can choose the technology that will take you to that service standard. Although in the presentation the figures, the graphics were in English, be rest assured the tool is available in Spanish and in French, so you have access to that, and there's no issues of language or translation for you. So I think that, I hope that answers it. I did see another question, which from Eric Estrada. So has any consideration been taken into account, such as population growth and the useful life of technology? So for the population growth, the underlying sheets are calculating population growth until 2030 in rural areas and urban areas in each country. We use the UN population growth rates, the median variant. But if you want to, if there have been changes in projections of population growth, then you can access the underlying sheets and change your population numbers. Or if you want to just go and check them, you can access the underlying sheets, and we can give you the code in order to unlock the sheets. In terms of useful life of the technology, as I said, if the technology will last 20 or 30 years, it has less impact on the tool. But if the technology will last only 5 years, then obviously you have to replace the technology or the infrastructure more before 2030, and that should be accounted for in the tool. If you put 5 years, then the tool will calculate the replacement cost of the technology. So I hope that helps.
Great, thank you, Guy. I think there was one comment from Nicaragua, and I'm wondering whether we could ask the colleague from Nicaragua, maybe even just to speak and take up the floor. After that, I will ask Vanessa to show the Menti so that people can respond to it as we go. But could we ask the colleague from Nicaragua if you would like to pick the floor?
Sí, muy interesante la herramienta que han presentado.
The tool you just presented is very interesting, and we in the Emergency Social Fund we have used the cost lines to design the water sanitation and hygiene project. Those economic thresholds allow us to set the feasibility or the economic feasibility of the projects. We do not have a tool like the one you just presented, so we have tried to set up the resource demand to meet the needs, to meet the SDGs before 2030, and we took into account the rural populations, in extreme poverty as well, or those populations with no coverage at all in water and sanitation. And we have applied those thresholds to those populations so we can have a global estimation on the resources needed in order to meet those needs, because we didn't have a methodology as such. So we saw that out of the over 7,000 communities in Nicaragua, about almost 2,000 had no coverage of water and sanitation at all. And that gave us an estimation of the amount of resources needed. But this is just some one part of the population. But there are other populations in those territories that still do not have the necessary coverage. What I wanted to know is whether we could use what we've had so far and link it to what you've developed. We had a consultant who developed a methodology for those prospects on the information needed for the estimates, sorry. So we have used that tool for the rural areas and rural populations with scattered populations or other populations with different features. And we have set our thresholds according to that. And we have allocated different values based on that. So we set the costs, we estimate the costs of the projects to see whether they're feasible. Now, we have a question. And we are trying to find a way to move forward with our coverage in order to meet SDG number 6. But this presents a change in the way of doing things, so we would need a new methodology to fund the costs of these projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'll ask if Katerina and Guy want to offer any comments on that. But before they do, let's see if we can take one more contribution. Luis, I see you have your hand up. So if we can't see Luis's hand now, but Luis, if you would like to speak, and then we'll get Katerina and Guy to respond to both of the comments from you two.
Hello, good afternoon for everybody. Thank you, Katarina. I clicked the icon, but it didn't work.
We can hear you now. That's good.
Yes, Citali, you said if someone work with similar. Well, I have something similar in Excel. Is a colleague prepared for estimate the marginal cost. I don't know. Sorry, I joined late the meeting. I don't know if that would be. It seems to me it's quite similar, really, but that gave me to understand maybe the use of this. I don't want to use the word of the paper, because when I say in English it sounds different.
No problem. And if you want, you can actually speak in Spanish, but I think we get that question, unless you wanted to add anything more to that, Luis.
What I'm looking for is actually a a more easy to work system. The other one have like 15 or 20 or more pages all linked together, and sometimes it's very complicated to load the data, the numbers. So maybe this work better. That's why I'm very much interested in it.
I see. Perfect. Thank you so much. So I think, Guy, if we could speak to the Guy and Katerina speaking to how easy is it to use this tool? In 2017, I worked with a number of countries who were using this tool. Some hired the consultant, some did it on their own in the ministry or working with the Ministry of Finance. So happy to share some of those insights. But let's get to Katerina and then Guy, and then we'll come back. We've got a hand from Mario, and then we've got the question on Menti that is waiting. Please look in the chat. We're putting the link to the Menti. If you can go there and just respond, particularly those that have already used the costing tool, if you could respond, that would be very helpful. Katarina, Guy.
Thank you, Sitali. Answering the question of Louise and coming back to what Madam Tellas has just said. So I've been using and supporting other agencies to use costing tools for more than 15 years. And I think the work that UNICEF has published in the SWA tools is the one that allows for most simplicity. If you have a lot of data and a lot of granular data, you can use it. If you have very simple aggregated data, you can also use it. So I think, and it was put there for that purpose, because and I come back to the points of Madam Tellas, which are actually identifying the cost of the SDGs is the simplest part of the process. The difficult part comes after, which is about the discussions of how are we going to finance this cost? Where is the money going to come from? But without this tool, if your country has very little data, use it. At least you have some ranges and you have cost ranges to allow you to make decisions when finance is scarce. Some of the countries here have plenty of public finance, have access to repayable finance, others don't. You will need to make choices. Where are we going to put the money that we have available in the sector? Or you are going to use some of these costing tools to try to influence the budgetary allocations. But this one is the simplest version of all the costing tools out there. It's an Excel sheet in the end. If you have little data, use it. If you have a lot of data, maybe Conagua is already developed something much more sophisticated than this, because they do have a lot more data than what is asked. Over.
Thank you very much. Well, as Betania said, in Paraguay, we don't have a lot of data. We always work with scarce numbers. So sometimes we have to interpolate, or do something to load the model. So thank you very much, Katarina.
Thank you so much, Luis. Thanks, Katerina. Guy, did you want to add anything, or should we get Mario?
I do have something to add. I think, Luis, you mentioned marginal costs. This tool estimates the costs of extending access to those who don't have access. Now, if you're going to do that with a completely new infrastructure, it'll have a given unit cost. But if you're going to expand an existing network to reach population that are inside the service area, then it may have a different unit cost from a completely new infrastructure. I think these nuances have to be understood and known, and if you have different ways of reaching population, then we have to make sure that is captured in the way you use the tool. And I did want to show one thing which I didn't explain before, and it's answering one of the questions in the chat box.
You need the slide to come up? Okay.
So can you see the Excel?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So when the tool was created, we wanted to include the costs of maintaining services for those who already have a service. So in the presentation sheet, the results sheet, you have first a figure showing the costs of extending coverage to the unserved. And then the next figure is the costs of maintaining service for those with a service. And then the next figure shows these costs added together. So it's the total cost. This is presented as a percentage of GDP, gross domestic product. And then the next graphs show the same, unserved, served by million US dollar, broken down by capital, capital maintenance and operational costs. So it does allow that, and is useful to ensure that you're not only thinking about financing for the unserved, but you've got to think about the maintenance and continued service for those with a service. So thank you. I think that's responded to those questions.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. So two things. Mario would like to speak, so we'll give him the floor. And then good news is that we've got some answers that have come through the Menti. So we'll get to see those also in a while. Mario, I also see we've got Andres. So Mario first.
Buenas tardes. Good evening. I hope you can all hear me correctly. We are very satisfied with this exchange because it helps us knowing about all the factors, the variables, the components that are related to this important task of calculating how much it would cost us to close the loop and to close those bridges, and also the cost of the operation and the maintenance. We have been revising our database, and we, apart from taking into account the baseline data, we have also been analyzing everything that these actions involve: project planning, the formulation, the design of the project, and also the later discussion in order to ensure the operations and the maintenance, and also take into account the costs of social work, environmental management, and in a nutshell, all the elements, including admin costs, in order to manage this kind of program. In our particular case, this was an enormous challenge. We have 45% for water and 50% for sanitation and hygiene of lack of coverage. So we've done the easy part, as it has been said. Now we have to do the most difficult part. We are entering an area where it is more difficult and more complicated. The population are very much dispersed, and so we need to keep going back and having to revise that baseline, because we need now to take into account other criteria, other factors, such as the distance, transportation, and other elements. So I just wanted to share that information about what we are working on. We are going to use the database that you suggested and that has been revised and reviewed already, and we will try to accommodate all these elements. And we all know how important it is to take into account the whole context. So I would like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to take part in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario. Thank you very much for indicating also your interest in taking this further. And on that note from Mario, if you're interested, anyone else also on the call, if you're interested to use this tool, you haven't used it before, or you used it now since it's been updated, you would like to use it again, could you just put your name and the name of your country in the chat, even if this is just an initial idea for you that you're interested to take it forward. Guy and Katerina, if we could just take one more, that's Andres, and then we should begin to close. We'll see also what we got on Menti. Andres.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just have a question regarding operation and maintenance costs. And this costs usually depend on how efficient the utility company is. I mean, the company that is operating and providing services. My question is if you take into account some threshold of efficiency, or is just an average number, or the cost is an average of how, I mean, of the cost of actual companies that are providing services right now. And I'm asking because we have an estimate of how much we have to invest to achieve SDG 6 in 2030, but we also think that we have room for lowering that cost by efficiency gains in the way companies are operated. So I just have that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andres. Guy and Katarina.
You start, Guy.
Okay, sure. Yes. So I think it depends what cost data you have access to, but essentially we want to know what it will cost when you extend coverage to the unserved population. So can you replicate the same service model, the same unit costs in the new context? So you have to take into account future changes. So some countries are really thinking about water scarcity and having to go further to collect, to haul the water. Other countries are thinking about efficiency gains, cheaper treatment technologies. So it would be good to include those issues when you come to decide which unit cost to use. So yeah, it's really your decision. And one thing I wanted to add is if you want to use the tool in a specific service area, a district, a municipality, then you can use the tool. You just need to go to the underlying sheets and change the population numbers. And then you can, once you've put in the new population numbers for that area, that service area, then you can use the tool as you would before. And we can advise you on how to do that. It's very simple, but we're here to help you. Thank you. Over to you, Katerina.
Yes, so answering the question of Andres Celis, I think indeed it depends on what data do you have. So if you are going to use average data on both large maintenance and minor maintenance, then the tool gives you an answer for the data you have. I can give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was working with the government of Mozambique, and they started, first they had an average cost for large maintenance for the whole country and minor maintenance. Then they started, once they started doing projections for the SDGs, they started looking at the cost per region. And looking at the cost per region, you could see that, for instance, large maintenance in some areas of the country, which were more inaccessible, were very expensive. And they started using costing tools to indeed bring efficiencies in the sector and make sure there were more drillers up north and in the interior of the country. And then over the years, tracking the cost data for maintenance, trying to bring those efficiencies in. In other cases, like Guy is mentioning, for instance, in Kenya or Uganda, the more the population is in remote areas, the higher the cost will be because of dispersed areas, because of difficulties in accessing certain type of technologies. So you can use the averages if that's the only data you have. you can start using the tool to use it to a geographic area with very specific, going to collect real costs to start populating the tool. Over.
Great, thank you so much. So this is a very interesting, exciting, and just very quickly, we received some responses on Menti, and so I've just asked if Vanessa could just show what we have received here. And Katarina, I don't know whether you want to make any quick commentary on this. But for those who have not yet done so, if you want to give your input, you go to www.menti.com and use the code here at the top, 96768938. Katarina, do you want to make any commentary on this before we move on?
I think it's the first question. So there's two. Thank you for the three answers. So one answer says there is no money or there's no human capital. There is no human capital and money to actually conduct the cost studies or to do the projections to achieve the SDG. So I was just not clear on what were the main challenges. And the other point in the Menti is the difficulty we face across all the countries in the sector, which is about being able to get credible data. Again, we don't have to start with a lot of detail, with very accurate data. All the initial costing processes that I have been involved in, they started with very raw data. It was different sources, different institutions. It was the data that was available. And that allows to put at least figures on the table. Policymakers need figures. We need figures to start influencing budgets to the sector. And then there's questions. And when there's questions, you can then go further into getting some of these data. Which, by the way, should be transparent. Data on budgets and allocations should be transparent. I know that many of the countries on the line, well, some of you have difficulties in tracking because there's so many institutions involved in the water sector that it's very difficult to track those funds. But again, don't start with perfection. We need all the data in a perfect state to have an answer on at least the degrees of millions of dollars that it will cost. We're talking about $100 million? We're talking about 200, 300? What are the big ranges and what kind of figures are we looking at in terms of costs?
Thank you so much, Katarina. I had a quick question, Guy and Katarina. Given what we've gone through with COVID, and it is still happening, so if, say, you did this exercise in 2017, where we had at least 40 countries or so that went through the exercise at some point since 2017, and you have data for 140 plus. So if you did the exercise then, 2017, and then we've had COVID, huge pandemic, it's affected service delivery. There've been tariff holidays, utilities have had a huge burden to deliver on these new policies under COVID. Would that be a good reason to have to do this? And I'm asking because I'm thinking that maybe the baseline will be difficult to have a new baseline, but would you think on the basis of COVID that it is advisable to rethink and see how to do this again vis-a-vis your targets for the SDGs and how you want to get there? You're on mute, Katarina.
I was trying to make eye contact with Guy. Guy, do you want to go first?
Was that your sign language?
Thanks, Katarina. We'll have to work on that a bit more. I think there may be some difficulties using this tool for estimating that because, well, firstly, a lot of countries don't know exactly how badly their wash services have been affected. What drop in coverage is there? And then if you have a drop in coverage, let's say it goes down by 10%, because some service providers can't provide the service, then bringing that population back to having the same coverage will involve a different unit cost to populations that never had the service. So we have to make sure we're applying the right unit cost to the right populations. But I agree with the sentiment, Satali, that if we're facing challenges, maybe prices are going up, maybe a lot of population are no longer served. We need to bring attention to that, and this costing tool may be able to do it with some manipulations, but I mean it's possible to do that off yourself in a spreadsheet. So I wouldn't insist that you have to use the tool to look at that.
Well, thank you so much, guys. So we had we had a comment coming in through the chat from Indiana. Indiana, if you want to pick the floor and speak, that is fine. But the comment was about the need to get more detailed assistance on how to fill in the Excel. Now, I think what might be helpful, Guy, if you had time, is just to show it the downloaded version. And I don't know if I mean, just where from the website, this is where we pick it, and then you have it now on your screen. If you just went through the sheets in the Spanish version, just very quickly, because I realized that what we were showing us on the screen, some of it was written in English. I think if you did that really quickly, that would be good. Now, Indiana, I think it would be good to know who else wants additional support on this. So we've got already an indication from Nicaragua that they would like to take this forward. Indiana, if you could just tell us the country also you're in, I think that would be good to know. Yes, so Guy, if you could just take sort of very quick top line steps in the introduction, what you find in the second worksheet, and then the last.
Certainly, yeah. This is a short version of the guideline. That there is a PDF version that is also on the website in English, French, and Spanish, and probably Portuguese. So I advise you to read this. It's not very long, but it'll help introduce you to what you have to do. So this is the totality of the data verification sheet. And you can see here that we just have basic water, safely managed water, basic sanitation, open defecation, safely managed sanitation, and hygiene. So we just have these on the left-hand side. And then you see the numbers in the columns. All these numbers need to be checked and confirmed and changed, preferably changed, because the data will be out of date for your country. And first of all, you just have to choose your country here. So let's find a Latin American country. So you first change it to your country. This is not working on, oh yeah, we can change it here. So when you change the country, it'll change the data in the table. And then you change the year. So if you have your WASH coverage data for 2020, then put it 2020. And then you have to go through one by one and check the data in each of these columns. So it's good if you try to do this. And if you hit some roadblocks, you need something explained, then you can go back to the guideline and the introduction sheet, or you can send a message to the Secretariat, who will probably send it to me. But we are providing a help desk for questions, and we can also, I mean, we also have our country offices. So UNICEF in your country might be able to help, or the regional office in Panama. So somehow you'll get support if you need something explained to you. But it would also be possible for us to check when you filled it out, for us to check, do a sanity check, make sure there's no outlying numbers, and yeah, that can be easily done. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I think that's very helpful. Do you want to show the one with the results? Where the results coming? Yes.
So here, so you can then change it to your preferred currency. You will have your own currency. It's not just dollars and Kenya shillings. So then you get the total costs in $1 million, and then you have a breakdown. This is the basic services. This is safely managed services. If you want to adjust the graphics, there are small changes you can make to improve it. You have a table with the numbers, and then you have somewhere you have costs by year, so you can see the evolution of costs from the baseline until 2030. Yeah, so this is illustrative, but you're welcome to go through the sheets yourselves and understand them better.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Guy. That was very helpful to go through it again in this way. And I hope that this is helpful to those that are interested in using it. We had a question from Madame Petit in Haiti, where she's asking whether these two can be used per operator. For example, Madame Petit, si vous voulez parler en anglais, if you would like to speak and just to put the question also to everybody, we can give you the floor.
Just to know that we have a national and regional tool, but it is to control the operators. I wanted to know if the operator could use these tools. I think it was my question. Can an operator, private operator, use this tool to manage the cost, the global cost, with new wall or new things and maintenance costs?
It is feasible. It may be easier for them to create their own tool if they have some skills in the Excel, because this is customized for estimating rural and urban costs at national level, but it is potentially applicable for an operator. It may need some adaptation to make it more user-friendly, I think, to be honest. But you could apply it similarly. You could apply it similarly and get some numbers out. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Madame Petit. We do not have any more questions. There are just a few things I think we need to do before we close. Katarina, I'm looking to you. You brought up a very important point about that this is the easy part. This might look like it's the more difficult part, but it's the easy part. The more difficult part is how to get, how to close the gap now. Once you've known what it costs, what you have at hand, what's the gap, how do you close it? So I was wondering if you could just speak a little on that, Katarina, in terms of some of the resources that are there that could help in that regard. I'm thinking the finance handbook, for example, and maybe also the work of the working group and other things. So if you wanted to make any quick remarks, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Thank you, Sitali. Well, it's also, the tool also does look at what finance is available from what sources. So it's also good to start thinking, so which sources do we have? Is it taxes? Is it tariffs? Is it repayable finance? How are the existing costs being covered and what is the gap? And as more countries struggle with financing the sector, SWA last year has launched a handbook for finance ministers. and it does provide 4 areas of interventions with examples from very different countries in very different stages of development on how to increase each of these sources of finance. And there's quite some examples from Latin America. If we can put the link with the Spanish document on the chat, you can also access and yeah, see how then once you have the cost data, how are you going to finance? How are you going to increase existing finance? But also, as it was mentioned in this discussion, how are you going to make existing finance more efficient? How can you reduce some of the costs, for instance? It's also part of those discussions. Over.
Thank you so much, Katerina. All right, so Vanessa is very quick. So yes, I think what Vanessa has put is the costing tool, right? What we need is the handbook, the Spanish version of the handbook. So if you could find that, Vanessa, that would be great. Now, we're really keen to know if some of you here are thinking about using the tool. So we've already heard, I think, from Nicaragua, but I would like to know if there are others that are thinking, well, you may not have completely made up your mind now, but if you think you might be interested in using this tool, please just indicate in the chat so we could see if there's a way in which we could prepare to support that process. So feel free to put that information in the chat. And then Guy, I was going to share one quick slide just about other SWA business. So if you wanted to make any remarks on the costing too, this would be the point. If you had any additional.
Thank you, Satali. I think that's it. I mean, I already made the point about this being really just a start. It can't be adapted to every situation. So if you find that it doesn't meet your needs and that you don't have alternative tools, then you need to consider creating new tools in order to make these estimates. But we're here to help you in applying this tool and hope that you find it useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So just to close, and thank you, Vanessa, for Vanessa has put in the chat the manual on finance, and it's in Spanish. So I was going to close just by sharing some of the things that we are doing in the broader SWA, and just to announce some things that are coming up in the coming weeks or so. So first of all, this year, we're focusing a lot on climate change. We're also focusing on gender, and at the end of next month, we'll do a webinar which will focus on finance and gender. And then WASH finance, sector financing, this discussion that we're doing today is contributing to this priority that we have for 2021. And then we're also looking to engage a lot more with the parliamentarians. Basically, we are preparing a handbook also for parliamentarians, and that handbook is expected to come out in December. And then for some countries, we're looking to engage with heads of state, particularly to see if they could provide the steer and support and political engagement that could support water and sanitation sector. Next month in June, we're doing a series of webinars on finance. So we have the first one starting next week on Tuesday, which will look at tariffs. And then we'll have subsequent webinars on affordability, on tracking WASH resources, and then on inequalities as well. So those webinars will happen in June every week on Tuesday. I believe that most of you have received this information. If you don't have that information, let us know, and then we will make sure that it is sent to you. We just wanted to also remind you, if you have not received this information, let us know. We are also rolling out the results framework. This is basically helping us to know if the partnership is contributing to progress and change at the country level, but it is also a way for you as partners to know if you're getting what you want from the partnership. So this results framework was launched in February, each country was requested to identify one person who could act as a champion or as the focal point or as the person who will help support the implementation of this results framework. We have received, some countries have told us who this person is, some countries have not yet done so. So we are putting here just a reminder, if you could, if you have not yet done so, if you have not yet identified this monitoring champion for the results framework, to send us that information. If you want more information on that, no problem, we can arrange a subsequent discussion. And then lastly, we will be preparing a global report on the mutual accountability mechanism. So this follows the commitments which have been made in the last 2 years. So I'll be reporting on this in third, fourth quarter of this year. If your government or institution has made commitments and you would like your report to be included in this global report, you would need to submit your progress update by June, by the end of June. So if you could please, if you have an update on that report, or if you plan to do an update on the commitments, please do that soon, so that in June you could submit that and then it will be included in the global report. If you need more information on any of this, please write to Vanessa, write to me, and we'll be able to arrange a specific country call with you and other partners in your country. For today, would really like to thank you for making time to join this discussion, for all the questions and comments and discussions that we had. Once again, if there's any additional questions or comments, please let us know. Would like to thank Katarina and Guy for their support in making this, on the content for this webinar, both on the costing too, but also just on the general comments about the work that we're doing on WASH Finance. I would like to thank Vanessa and Diana, who've been behind the scenes doing a lot of work on the presentations, and also just making sure that any information is provided in the chat. Thank you to our interpreters who are also doing work behind the scenes, making this meeting possible. Once again, a big thanks to all of you, and hopefully we'll see you sometime soon, maybe next week during the webinar on finance. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Au revoir, bye-bye.
Au revoir, gracias.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Alban. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Gracias, hasta luego.